Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Ralph English Podcast. It is absolutely brilliant to have you tuning in today. Whether you are listening while taking a lovely morning walk, perhaps you're sitting on the bus on your daily commute, or just relaxing at home with a nice cup of tea, well, you are incredibly welcome here. It's quite special to share this time with you, and I am genuinely happy you've chosen to spend a bit of your day with us. And joining me today, as always, is the wonderful Aria. Say hello, Aria.
Hey, everybody. It is so awesome to be here with you all today. I am, totally thrilled to dive into this one because we are talking about something that trips up so many people.
Quite right. Even native speakers sometimes.
Oh, for sure. It happens all the time.
So, picture this situation. You are talking to a colleague, or maybe a good friend, and you offer them a perfectly well-meaning piece of advice.
Right. You're just trying to be helpful.
Exactly. But suddenly, you watch their face completely freeze up.
Oh, I know that look. That is a look of sheer, unexpected panic.
Yes. It's as if you just handed them a ticking time bomb instead of a helpful little tip about their spreadsheet. And you're just standing there wondering, well, what did I just say? I was only trying to help.
You thought you were throwing them a life preserver, but based on their reaction, they feel like you just read them their rights.
Spot on. And the reason that happens so often, especially if you are learning English or navigating different cultural contexts, is because in English, giving advice is not just about plugging in a vocabulary word.
No, it's deeply tied to implied consequences. It's basically a complete social minefield.
It really is. And that brings us to what we are doing today. Today, you're going to learn the difference between three very important English words: should, ought to, and had better.
Yeah, these all mean advice, but they are absolutely not the same.
By the end of this episode, you will know exactly which one to use and when.
Exactly. By the time this episode is finished, you will sound more natural, more confident, and more like a real English speaker. You will know how to give advice like a native speaker, gently, seriously, or with a strong warning, exactly the right way, at exactly the right moment.
That is a brilliant promise. So to make sense of this deep dive, we're going to use a lovely little mental image. Think of giving advice as climbing a ladder, the advice ladder.
I love that visual.
Every time you step up a rung on this ladder, you are fundamentally changing the social weight of the conversation. And we're going to start at the very bottom.
Rung number 1.
Yes, the safest, most common baseline for giving advice. And the magic word here is should.
Should. The friendly foundation. This is the most common and friendly way to give advice. You use it when you just want to suggest something helpful.
Quite right. There is zero danger and absolutely no urgency. It's just warm and kind.
Totally. When you use should, you are prioritizing the other person's comfort. You are essentially saying, hey, I have an idea, it might be helpful for you, but if you ignore it, the world will keep spinning.
What's fascinating to me is how the complete lack of stakes defines this word. It's about preserving the other person's autonomy, you see.
Yes, and that is so important for language learners.
Think about a classic scenario. Say you are visiting London for the first time, and a local tells you, well, you should try the fish and chips here. They're brilliant.
Right, they aren't giving you an order.
Not at all. It feels like a friend, or perhaps your mom, putting a warm arm around your shoulder. It's welcoming.
For sure. And the grammar itself is incredibly forgiving. You don't have to overthink the syntax at all. It's just the subject, the word should, and the basic action verb.
Give us an example.
Like, you should drink more water. Or you should get some rest. It's super clean.
Very clean. And it works beautifully in questions, too. When you are just seeking a gentle opinion, you might ask, what should I do? Or should I take this new job?
You aren't asking someone to dictate your life. You're just, inviting their perspective.
Precisely. And even the negative form feels quite caring.
Yeah. If I say, hey, you shouldn't stay up too late, it doesn't sound like a strict curfew from a prison guard. It sounds like someone who genuinely wants you to be well rested for tomorrow.
It's advice driven by care, not by control.
Yeah.
Which is why should is the ultimate safety net.
Oh, totally.
When you are navigating a new language, your biggest fear is usually causing accidental offense. Should completely removes that risk. It is the conversational equivalent of a padded room.
A padded room. I love that.
You can bounce around in there, suggest restaurants, advise on sleep habits, and you are never going to step on a social landmine. If I tell you that you should try the fish and chips and you decide to have a pizza instead, I'm not going to be angry with you.
Hey, if you are enjoying this so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with a friend who is learning English, and subscribe to Talk Ralph English Podcast. It really helps us, and it means so much to us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Now, should is lovely, But what happens when a friendly suggestion just isn't enough?
Right, like when things get serious.
Say a friend isn't merely a bit tired, but they are actively making a terrible life decision. If you just use should, you might actually sound like you don't really care,
Yeah, that's where we hit a limitation in the language.
which forces us to step up.
Mm-hmm.
We're leaving the land of casual suggestions and stepping onto the middle of the ladder. Run number 2. The word here is ought to.
Ooh, ought to. The voice of responsibility. This is where we transition from what is just a good idea to what is right or proper.
Yes, it's a little stronger than should, and it carries this deep feeling of duty.
It's basically the conscience of the English language.
Exactly. If I say you should apologize to her, I'm suggesting it's a pragmatic tip. It might smooth things over.
Mhm.
But if I say you ought to apologize to her, I am appealing directly to your sense of right and wrong.
You're telling them they have a moral duty to repair that relationship.
Notice how the energy completely shifts there. You aren't just tossing out a life hack anymore. You're bringing values into the conversation.
The structure is just as simple, though. It's subject plus ought to plus the base verb, like we ought to take care of our environment, or children ought to respect their elders.
But this is where we have to talk about a rather interesting transatlantic divide, isn't it?
Oh, for sure. It's a huge regional nuance.
Because in the UK, we use ought to quite frequently for societal expectations.
Yeah.
Like you ought to queue up properly or you ought to return that dropped wallet. But I understand it lands a bit differently in the States.
It totally does. In American English, we default to should for almost everything on the lower two rungs.
Really?
Yeah. If you stick to should in the US, you will be perfectly understood and completely safe. In fact, ought to can sometimes sound a little bit formal or even old-fashioned to American ears.
So would you advise a learner to just throw ought to out the window if they are speaking to an American?
No, definitely not. It absolutely survives in American English, but we save it for very specific moments. We use it when we want to, like, elevate the advice to a moral level.
Ah, I see.
Think about an older mentor passing down wisdom to a junior employee. They might say, you know, you ought to be honest in your work. They aren't just giving a career tip, they are imparting a core value.
That makes perfect sense.
When you use ought to in the US, you are tapping into a shared social contract. You're reminding the person of the rules we all agree to live by.
It's the difference between this will help you and this is required of a good person. Now, speaking of how we actually use it in daily life, there is a brilliant little pronunciation shortcut we need to mention.
Oh yeah, the spoken version.
When native speakers talk quickly, especially British speakers, but Americans too, we rarely pronounce every single letter. Ought to blurs together into what sounds like orta, O-R-T-A. You ought to do this.
Totally. You are to call your mom. It's just the natural rhythm of speech. Language is famously lazy. We always find the path of least resistance.
We certainly do. And that laziness also explains what happens to the negative form of this word. Technically, the negative is ought not to. You ought not to speak to me in such a tone.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a character from a 19th century novel scolding someone in a drawing room.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It sounds incredibly clunky. Which is why, in everyday modern speech, we usually just abandon it completely.
Yeah, we just drop back down a rung.
Exactly. If we want to express a negative moral duty, we usually just drop back down to the first rung and say shouldn't. It's just easier on the tongue.
Okay, so we've covered the friendly tip and we've covered the moral duty. Now it is time to jump to the very top rung of the ladder.
Rung number 3.
This is the danger zone. And the phrase is, had better.
Had better. This is where advice comes with teeth. This isn't really advice at all. It's an urgent warning dressed up to look like advice.
Yep.
It means do this right now or something bad will happen.
Yeah.
There's always a consequence lurking right behind this phrase.
Yes, the invisible or ilasi. But before we get to the social danger of this phrase, we have to talk about the grammar because it confuses so many learners.
Oh, you mean the word had?
Yes. Why does an urgent present moment warning use the word had? It looks exactly like the past tense.
It does look strange.
If I'm warning you about something happening right now, why am I saying you had better? It defies logic.
It is one of those wonderfully frustrating quirks of English. You are absolutely right to be confused because structurally, had is the past tense. But functionally, in this specific phrase, it has completely detached from the past. It is entirely locked into the immediate, present, or the imminent future.
It's like a linguistic imposter.
Precisely. And Honestly, in spoken English, the word had almost always gets swallowed by a contraction anyway. You rarely hear someone clearly enunciate "you had better."
Yo,
You
never.
hear the short form,
Yeah.
better subject, apostrophe D, better base verb. You better leave now or you'll miss the train.
And the negative warning is even sharper. You'd better not.
Oh, that's a strong one.
Think about a text message you might get from a super punctual friend when you are running late. You'd better not be stuck in traffic again. Just hearing that makes my heart rate spike.
Because your brain instantly recognizes the threat. You better not be stuck in traffic, or else I am leaving without you, or else I am going to be furious. The consequence is completely silent, but it is deafening.
And before we go further, if this is helpful to you, please hit that like button and share this with someone who needs it. We make this for you, and your support keeps us going.
Absolutely. We appreciate it so much. Now, exploring that hidden or LLC brings us to the most crucial rule of rung 3, social hierarchy.
Oh boy, here we go.
Because had better carries an implied threat of consequences. When you use it, you are inherently claiming a position of authority over the situation or the person you are talking to.
This is exactly where the panic happens, so let's break down who we can actually use this with safely.
Good idea.
You can use it with equals, like your friends or siblings, when the situation itself is the authority. Like, we'd better leave now, or the restaurant will close. The restaurant's operating hours hold the authority. You're just pointing out the reality.
Quite right. You can also use it with people lower than you in a specific hierarchy. For instance, a parent speaking to a child. You'd better finish your homework before you turn on the television.
Because the parent holds the consequence.
Exactly. Or perhaps in a situation of objective professional urgency. A doctor telling a patient, you'd better start taking this medication, your blood pressure is dangerously high. The doctor is utilizing the authority of medical science to warn you.
But UT, and this is a massive but, if you use had better upwards in the social hierarchy, it is a total disaster.
Oh, a career-ending disaster. If you walk up to your boss and say, you'd better approve my holiday request today.
Wow. Just hearing you say that makes me cringe.
Because I am artificially elevating myself in the social hierarchy. I am implying or ELSC, and the boss knows perfectly well I do not have the power to enforce an or ELSC. It comes across as incredibly aggressive, insubordinate, and demanding.
Exactly. And this is why people freeze up. If a well-meaning learner accidentally uses rung 3 instead of rung 1, the listener's brain stops hearing advice and starts scanning the room for a threat.
It triggers a fight or flight response.
Yeah. If someone cheerfully tells me, you better try the fish and chips, I'm sitting there thinking, wait, is the chef going to attack me if I don't? Is this a hostage situation?
Yeah. You have accidentally introduced a mortal threat into a lovely lunch recommendation.
Yeah.
It completely changes the emotional reality of the room.
So let's put this into practice organically. Let's look at how we naturally escalate through these rungs in real life without even thinking about it.
Brilliant idea. Let's take a common health scenario. Imagine a friend has been complaining about a rather bad headache for a few days.
Okay.
If I'm just being casual, checking in over a cup of coffee, I'll stay at the bottom of the ladder. I'll lean in, keep my voice soft, and say, you really should see a doctor. It's just warm care.
Right. But what if it's been a week? The headache is worse, and they are ignoring it. Should isn't enough anymore. My tone is going to drop. I'm getting serious.
You step up to rung 2.
Yep. I'm stepping up to the middle rung to appeal to their sense of responsibility. Look, you've had this for days. You ought to go in. You need to take care of yourself.
I can hear the shift in your voice. It's much firmer. And then, let's say they suddenly become dizzy and their vision blurs. All manners go out the window.
We are in the danger zone.
Exactly. My eyes go wide, my voice is sharp, and I'm at the top of the ladder.
Right.
You are dizzy. You'd better get to the hospital right now. I'm basically saying if you don't go, I am dragging you to the car myself.
Notice how our body language, our tone, and our facial expressions naturally shifted to match the grammatical structure. We didn't just change the vocabulary, we changed the entire energy of the conversation.
Let's do one more, perhaps a career scenario.
Yeah.
Let's say a friend is thinking about applying for a promotion.
If I was just being a supportive cheerleader, I'm super bubbly. Hey, you should apply for that job. It's totally encouraging.
But let's say we are having a strategic career discussion. I want to point out that this aligns perfectly with their long-term goals. I'll say, you really ought to apply. It's the right move for your career. It feels grounded and wise.
And then suddenly, the deadline is in 10 minutes. Pure adrenaline. The portal is closing. You'd better apply right now. Time is running out. The consequence is losing the opportunity forever.
This really highlights what true fluency looks like, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Fluency isn't just memorizing 1,000 vocabulary words from a textbook.
Definitely not.
It's having a toolbox and knowing which specific social tool to pull out for the exact right moment. You can't use a hammer to tighten a screw.
For sure. If you want to be encouraging, you need should. If you want to talk about values and duty, you need ought to. If you need to stop a disaster, you need had better.
Before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, something that connects this English framework to the broader tapestry of human language. Think about how your own native language, or perhaps any other languages you speak, handles these three distinct levels of urgency.
Oh, I love this question.
When you want to shift from a friendly suggestion to a moral duty to an urgent warning with consequences, well, does your language actually force you to change the core verbs the way we do in English? Or do you use the exact same vocabulary words, but rely entirely on shifting your tone of voice, your facial expression, or perhaps adding a little modifier word at the end of the sentence?
Does the grammar change or does the performance change? That is such a cool way to look at it. Observing that difference might change the way you translate your thoughts forever.
It really might.
It makes you realize that speaking English naturally isn't just about translating word for word. It's about translating the temperature of the situation into the right grammatical structure.
Translating the temperature. That is a brilliant way to phrase it. So the next time you find yourself about to offer someone a piece of advice, take a split second. Look at that advice ladder in your mind.
Think about the stakes.
Exactly. Decide what temperature you want to set. Are we offering a warm blanket, a guiding hand, or flashing red light? And then, well, choose your run carefully, because once you do, that ticking time bomb of miscommunication, it is completely diffused.
Perfectly said.
That is all for today's deep dive. If this episode helped you today, please like, share, and subscribe. Every single like and every share helps us reach more learners around the world. We are grateful for every one of you. Keep practicing, keep climbing that ladder, and we will catch you on the next one. Goodbye for now.